The crown remembers every oath sworn beneath moonlight, especially the ones a king betrays. The whisper moved through the moon temple like a breath beneath a locked door, too soft for the nobles to name and too clear for Emma Carter to ignore. She stood 12 feet behind the altar, holding the silver train of her sister's wedding gown while narrow cuffs circled her wrists beneath white gloves. No one in the crowded hall called them chains. The royal court preferred gentler words for cruel things. Service, duty, obedience. Emma had learned that a beautiful word could still become a prison. At the altar, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood faced Olivia beneath a ceiling painted with stars. His black ceremonial coat carried the crest of 12 united packs, and the ancient crown rested on a velvet cushion beside him. He looked every inch the ruler the kingdom expected, calm, powerful, untouched by doubt. Only Emma saw the tension in his shoulders. Only she felt the mate bond trembling between them like a silver thread pulled too tight. A true bond could be denied, but forcing it into silence wounded both souls connected to it. Adrian's eyes found hers for one forbidden second. Her breath caught. His wolf recognized her. It always did. Then he turned back to Olivia. The priestess raised her hands, and the temple doors closed with a low, final sound. Before the moon goddess and every pack gathered here, she said, "Do you accept Olivia Carter as your chosen Luna?" Silence spread across the marble floor. Emma waited for Adrian to speak, though she already knew his answer. 3 months earlier, beneath the pines, he had called her his destiny. 2 weeks later, before the royal council, he had called her unsuitable. Now she stood behind the sister he had chosen in her place, carrying a bridal train while the court pretended not to notice the truth. "I accept," Adrian said. The mate bond tightened. Emma lowered her gaze before anyone could see the hurt in it. Olivia smiled beneath her pearl-covered veil, but her fingers curled around the bouquet as though she feared it might slip away. The priestess turned toward the crown. "Then let the bloodline of Blackwood be confirmed." Beneath the moon, Adrian lifted the ancient silver circlet. The instant his fingers touched it, every candle in the temple went dark. A collective gasp rose from nearly 300 guests. Moonlight poured through the high windows, cold and bright, gathering around Adrian's hands. The crown flashed once. Then it tore itself from his grasp. It struck the marble with a clear metallic note and rolled past the priestess, past the stunned bride, past the kneeling counselors. No one moved. No one breathed. The crown crossed the altar floor and stopped against Emma's bare shoe. Her cuffs opened on their own. Silver fell quietly beside her feet. Across the temple, nobles began to kneel, one after another, compelled by a power older than any royal command. Adrian stared at Emma as the authority vanished from his voice, his title, and the crest upon his chest. The elderly priestess looked from the fallen king to the woman he had forced into servitude. When she spoke, the moon goddess seemed to speak through her. "The moon remembers the mate you betrayed." 3 months earlier, Emma Carter had been gathering moonflowers near the northern edge of Blackwood territory when the forest suddenly fell silent. The birds stopped calling. The wind withdrew from the pines. Even the creek beside her seemed to hold its breath. Emma straightened slowly, a basket resting against her hip, and felt a presence approaching through the trees. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood emerged from the silver mist in a dark riding coat, alone and without his royal guard. She recognized him at once, though she had only seen his face on coins and ceremonial portraits. He was taller than she expected, with black hair touched by the rain and eyes the color of winter moonlight. The instant those eyes found hers, warmth rushed through Emma's chest. Her sleeping wolf rose with a startled cry. One word echoed through every part of her. "Mate." Adrian stopped several feet away. His controlled expression broke for one unguarded second, and Emma knew he had felt it too. The air between them became charged with something ancient and undeniable. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emma Carter." His gaze moved to the simple gray dress she wore, then to the small omega pendant at her throat. The softness vanished from his face. "You are an omega." It was not a question. Emma lifted her chin. "That is my rank. It is not my name." Surprise flickered in his eyes, followed by something warmer. He stepped closer, and the mate bond settled around them like moonlight across still water. "The council has searched every noble house for the woman destined to stand beside me," he said quietly. They never thought to search here. For one brief afternoon, Adrian allowed himself to forget the crown. He walked beside Emma along the creek and listened as she spoke about healing herbs, old songs, and the quiet lives hidden beyond palace walls. When rain began to fall, he placed his coat over her shoulders. Beneath the pines, with no witnesses and no court to judge them, he touched her hand and promised, "Whatever happens next, you will not face it alone." Emma believed him. 2 days later, royal riders arrived at the Carter home. They did not bring a proposal. They brought an order. Emma was escorted to the palace and presented before 12 council members who studied her as though she were a problem to be solved. Victor Hale stood nearest the throne, his silver-trimmed robes perfectly arranged. "An untrained Omega cannot become Luna," he said. "The Southern Pacts will withdraw their loyalty. The Northern Alphas will challenge your rule. Your Majesty needs a bride who strengthens the crown." Then Olivia entered. Emma's younger sister wore blue silk and carried herself with the confidence their mother had carefully encouraged. She was graceful, educated, and descended from the same family line, but without the rank the council considered shameful. Victor smiled as though the matter had already been settled. "Olivia Carter is the acceptable choice." Emma looked at Adrian. The bond between them reached for him, pleading without words. He sat motionless on the black throne, one hand closed around its carved arm. For a moment, she saw the man from the forest beneath the weight of the king. Then Adrian looked toward the assembled alphas, the maps of disputed borders, and the crown resting beside him. Fear entered his eyes, disguised as duty. "Emma will remain at the palace," he said at last. Hope rose in her before his next words extinguished it. "She will serve her sister until the wedding is complete." The chamber became painfully quiet. Emma did not cry. She only removed his coat from her shoulders, folded it carefully, and placed it at the foot of the throne. "You promised I would not face this alone," she whispered. Adrian's gaze dropped, but he did not change his command. As the guards opened the doors, Victor leaned close to the king and murmured, "You have chosen wisely." Far above the palace, daylight faded behind a cloudless sky, and for the first time in generations, the moon disappeared before sunset. By the next morning, Blackwood Palace had already learned how to pretend nothing was wrong. Servants opened the curtains, counselors carried sealed documents through polished corridors, and bells announced breakfast beneath a sky where the moon should have been fading. Emma stood in Olivia's new chambers, fastening pearl buttons along the back of a royal blue gown, while 3 seamstresses waited nearby. No one spoke to her unless an order required it. The palace had changed her place in the world with remarkable speed. 2 days earlier, she had been a guest summoned by the king. Now a narrow silver bracelet marked her as a servant of the future Luna. Olivia watched their reflections in the mirror. Her golden hair had been arranged beneath a delicate circlet, and every detail made her look like the bride the kingdom expected. Yet her hands remained tightly folded in her lap. "Does he speak about me?" she asked after the seamstresses left. Emma continued adjusting the gown. "The king does not speak to me." That was not my question. Their eyes met in the glass. Beneath Olivia's practiced confidence, Emma saw fear. It was not fear of Adrian's power. It was fear of standing beside a man whose soul had already recognized someone else. "He chose you," Emma said. Olivia's expression hardened. "He chose stability. Victor says affection will follow. Victor says whatever protects Victor." Olivia turned sharply, but before she could answer, the chamber doors opened. Adrian entered with Victor Hale and 2 royal witnesses. Emma's wolf stirred at once. The mate bond reached toward him with painful hope, but Adrian remained near the doorway, dressed in formal black, his face carefully unreadable. Victor placed a parchment on the table. Red wax sealed its lower edge beside a small silver pen. "The council requires discretion," he said. "Rumors concerning an improper bond could weaken the coming alliance." Emma looked at Adrian. "You want me to deny what the moon goddess chose?" His jaw tightened. "I want to prevent unrest." "Those are not the same thing." Victor unfolded the parchment. It declared that Emma would never reveal the mate bond, challenge Olivia's position, or leave royal service before the wedding. In return, the Carter household would retain its land and protection. Emma read the final line twice. If she refused, her mother and younger cousins could be removed from Blackwood territory. "This is not an agreement," she said quietly. "It is a threat written in elegant language." Adrian took one step forward. Your family will be safe. And what will I be? He had no answer. Olivia looked away. For the first time, her victory seemed to weigh more than the crown she wanted. Emma lifted the silver pen. She could have thrown it aside. She could have exposed Adrian before every pack and let the kingdom fracture around the truth. Instead, she pictured her family's small farmhouse, the orchard her father had planted, and the children who had never asked to become pieces in a royal game. She pressed the pen to her palm until a single drop of blood appeared, then signed her name. The parchment shimmered. A cold band of light closed around her wrist, joining the silver bracelet already there. The sunlight beyond the windows vanished, though noon was still hours away. Emma heard a woman's voice beneath the sudden silence, ancient and sorrowful. A crown taken through betrayal will be paid for by the blood that inherits it. Adrian heard nothing, but his face changed when the royal crest on the parchment split down the center. The royal crest remained split across the parchment long after sunlight. Returned to the chamber, but Victor Hale dismissed it as an imperfection in the seal. Adrian said nothing. Emma watched him study the broken symbol, and for one fragile moment, she thought he might finally listen to the warning placed before him. Instead, he ordered the document secured in the royal archive and left without looking back. Over the following weeks, Blackwood Palace filled with flowers, musicians, visiting alphas, and endless preparations for the wedding. Emma moved through it all like a shadow. She measured silk, carried invitations, and stood beside Olivia during rehearsals while the silver band around her wrist grew colder each day. The blood oath prevented her from revealing the mate bond, but it could not silence the bond itself. A true bond could be denied, yet every attempt to suppress it placed the strain upon both souls. Whenever Emma grew tired, Adrian felt the same heaviness settle behind his eyes. Whenever the bracelet tightened around her wrist, his own hand became numb. At first, he blamed the pressure of ruling. Then one evening, during a council dinner, Emma reached for a crystal pitcher and the silver band suddenly constricted. Her breath caught. Across the hall, Adrian dropped his glass. The sharp sound silenced the table. He stared at his wrist as though an invisible circle had closed around it. Emma knew then. The bond was carrying every discomfort she endured directly to him. Adrian found her later in the western corridor, where moonlight stretched across the floor in pale squares. "Is the bracelet hurting you?" he asked. Emma kept walking. "Would it matter if it was? I can have it adjusted." She stopped and turned toward him. "You could have refused to place it there." His expression tightened. "The council required proof that you would remain silent. And you required the council more than you required your honor." The words landed softly, but Adrian flinched as though they had been spoken before the entire kingdom. He reached toward her wrist, then stopped before touching it. "I never wanted you harmed." Emma looked at the hand suspended between them. "You wanted the result without accepting the cost." She stepped away, leaving him alone beneath the cold light. The next morning, new orders appeared in every servant's hall. Emma was no longer to carry heavy trays, work past sunset, or enter the lower corridors where the air turned bitterly cold. The palace staff called the changes mercy. Emma recognized them as guilt. Olivia recognized something else. That afternoon, she summoned Emma to the bridal chamber and placed a velvet box on the dressing table. Inside rested a narrow silver collar set with a blue stone. "Victor says this will conceal the mate sent during the ceremony," Olivia said. Emma did not touch it. "You already have his promise." "A promise is not the same as peace." Olivia's voice trembled despite her careful posture. "Every time he enters a room, he searches for you." Emma met her sister's reflection. "Then perhaps you should ask why you still want to stand beside him." Olivia closed the box with a sharp click. "Because I was raised for this. Because Mother spent 20 years preparing me. Because if I walk away now, I become nothing. You would become yourself." The answer seemed to frighten Olivia more than failure. At the final wedding rehearsal, Victor fastened the collar around Emma's neck before the gathered court. The silver rested cold against her skin, muting the bond until her wolf became a distant whisper. Across the temple, Adrian went pale. His hand rose to his throat. The priestess paused. "Your Majesty?" Adrian tried to answer, but a sudden cough interrupted him, leaving a small red mark on the white cloth he lifted to his mouth. At that same instant, the blue stone at Emma's throat cracked from top to bottom, and the ancient crown on the altar gave a faint silver pulse. as though it had begun to remember. The crack in the blue stone was followed by a silence so complete that Emma could hear the faint hiss of the temple candles. Victor removed the collar at once and ordered the rehearsal ended, but the damage had already been seen by too many eyes. Adrian left with the royal physician. Olivia returned to her chambers without speaking. Emma remained beneath the painted stars, one hand resting lightly against her throat, wondering how long the palace could continue pretending the moon goddess was not answering. By the time the wedding day arrived, every corridor carried a different rumor. Some said the king was ill. Some said the northern pacts were preparing to withdraw their loyalty. Others whispered that the crown had not been blessed during the final rite. Victor silenced each rumor with threats of exile, then doubled the number of guards around the temple. Emma was dressed in white and silver, not as family, but as part of Olivia's ceremonial household. The broken blue stone had been replaced, though a thin line remained beneath its polished surface. As Emma fastened the final clasp on Olivia's gown, her sister caught her wrist. "Do you think the moon goddess is angry with me?" Olivia asked. The question sounded younger than she looked. Emma studied her carefully. "I think she is waiting for the truth." Olivia released her. "Truth does not protect people in this palace. Neither does a lie." The bells began before Olivia could answer. Hundreds of guests filled the temple, their formal clothes creating a dark river of velvet and silver beneath the high windows. Emma took her place behind the bride. Adrian stood at the altar, pale but composed, his black ceremonial coat hiding whatever weakness the bond had forced him to feel. When his eyes found Emma, the blue stone at her throat warmed. Then the priestess asked the question that would decide the future of the kingdom. Adrian accepted Olivia. The crown was lifted. In that instant, Emma realized they had arrived at the moment the moon had been warning them about. The candles died. The ancient silver circlet tore itself from Adrian's hands and rolled across the marble until it stopped at Emma's feet. Her cuffs opened. The collar fell away. Around her, nobles sank to their knees as a power older than law pressed through the room. The priestess spoke with the voice of the moon goddess, and every word seemed to enter the stone itself. A ruler who denies the sacred bond for ambition denies the source of his own authority. The crest on Adrian's coat faded. The royal banners overhead lost their black and silver color. He turned toward the guard. "Captain, seal the doors." Nothing happened. Adrian's command carried no alpha force. It was only the voice of a man in a silent hall. Victor moved before anyone else could recover. He stepped beside the altar and raised both hands. "The king has been rejected by the crown," he announced. "Until the council decides who may rule, royal authority returns to the regent." Adrian faced him. "You knew this could happen." Victor's calm expression was answer enough. Olivia backed away from the altar, her veil trembling around her shoulders. Emma bent and lifted the crown, expecting its metal to feel cold. Instead, it warmed beneath her fingers like something alive. A pale symbol appeared across its inner rim, the same shape as the mark hidden beneath the bracelet on her wrist. The priestess saw it and lowered her head. Victor saw it too. Fear flashed behind his eyes before he concealed it. "Guards," he said, his voice sharp with new authority. "Take Emma Carter into custody." No one moved at first. Then Victor looked directly at the assembled alphas. "The woman holding that crown is not a servant. She has the authority to judge every alpha who rules beneath it. If she remains free until sunrise, none of you may keep your throne without her consent." For several heartbeats, no one in the temple moved. Emma stood beneath the pale moonlight with the crown in her hands, while every path to the doors seemed to close around her. Victor's guards waited for an order they could understand, but the ancient power filling the room had unsettled even the strongest among them. Adrian stepped down from the altar. Without the force of an alpha command, his presence felt different, stripped of ceremony and fear. Yet when he moved between Emma and the approaching guards, the choice was still unmistakable. "She is under my protection," he said. Victor smiled without warmth. "You no longer have the authority to protect anyone. Then I will do it without authority." Olivia stared at Adrian as though she had never seen him clearly before. Emma wanted to believe the words meant something, but memory stood between them like a locked gate. He had protected his crown when she needed him to. Protect her. One brave moment could not erase months of silence. The priestess struck her staff against the marble. A hidden door opened behind the altar, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. The first Moonborn queens built paths beneath every royal sanctuary, she said. The crown will remember the way, even if the palace has forgotten. Adrian reached for Emma's hand, but she pulled free. Do not mistake necessity for forgiveness. Pain crossed his face. I will not. Olivia gathered her gown and followed them into the passage. The priestess remained behind long enough to close the stone door, and the noise of the temple became a distant murmur. They moved through a tunnel barely 4 feet wide, guided by blue crystals set into the walls. The crown remained warm in Emma's hands, pulsing whenever they reached a fork, as though it recognized roads carved long before Adrian's bloodline began to rule. After nearly half a mile, the passage opened into the pine forest beyond the eastern wall. Cold air rushed around them. The palace bells began ringing behind the trees. Victor had declared them fugitives. Adrian led them toward an abandoned ranger cabin 3 miles north, but without his alpha strength, the journey took more from him than he expected. By the time they reached the clearing, his breathing had grown uneven. Emma saw him press one hand against his side before quickly lowering it. You are hurt, she said. It is nothing. That answer has caused enough damage in this family. Inside the cabin, Olivia found clean cloth while Emma warmed water over the small iron stove. Adrian sat near the window, silent and pale. Emma tended the injury without tenderness, but without cruelty. He washed her hands, as though her kindness confused him more than anger would have. Why are you helping me? He asked. Emma tied the cloth securely and stepped back. Because I refuse to become the kind of person who measures mercy by what someone deserves. His eyes lowered. I did not deserve yours. No, she said. You did not. The truth filled the room more heavily than accusation. Outside, lanterns appeared among the trees, moving steadily closer. Victor's. Riders had found their trail. Olivia turned toward Emma, fear breaking through her composure. There is something you need to know before they reach us. Emma looked at her sister. Olivia's hands were trembling. I knew Adrian was your mate before the council ever chose me. Victor told me the first night, and I agreed to take your place anyway. Emma did not answer at once. Outside the cabin, lanterns drifted between the trees, pale points of light moving closer through the dark. Inside, the fire gave a soft crackle, but the room felt colder than the forest. Olivia stood near the table with both hands clasped against her waist, her bridal silk stained at the hem from the escape. Victor said the bond would ruin everything, she continued. He said the council would never accept you, and that if I refused, our family would lose its protection. Emma looked at her sister and heard the familiar shape of the same excuse Adrian had used. Duty, stability, fear dressed as necessity. So you let them turn me into your servant, Emma said. Olivia's eyes filled with shame. Yes. The single word carried more weight than a long defense. Adrian remained near the window, watching the lanterns through a gap in the curtain. What else did Victor tell you? He asked. Olivia hesitated. Then she reached beneath the layers of her gown and removed a folded piece of parchment. He gave me this before the ceremony. He told me to destroy it if anything went wrong. Emma unfolded it on the table. The document was an old birth record bearing the seal of the Moon Temple. Her name appeared beside a symbol shaped like a crescent crossed by 3 stars. Beneath it, written in faded ink, were the words last daughter of the Moonborn line. Emma read the sentence twice. This is impossible. It is not, said a voice from the shadows near the hearth. A section of the stone floor shifted open, and the elderly priestess climbed from a narrow stairway hidden beneath the cabin. Her gray cloak was damp with mist. The first Moonborn queens built these shelters above the same paths that run beneath the palace, she said. That is how I found you, and it is how we will leave. Adrian moved aside. As she approached the table, your family did not give you life, Emma. They gave you refuge. The priestess explained that 23 years earlier, Victor had ordered every record of the Moonborn bloodline erased. The Moonborn were not rulers by birth. They were guardians of choice, descendants of women who could confirm or reject any crown presented beneath the moon. The crown also remembered every oath sworn before it, every royal seal placed upon a lie, and every law twisted for ambition. Emma's true mother had placed her with the Carter family before disappearing, trusting them to keep the child hidden. Victor had later discovered the truth and prepared Olivia as a false heir, believing she could be controlled. He never wanted me to become Luna, Olivia whispered. He wanted Adrian weakened long enough to take the throne. The priestess nodded. And now he must remove the one person the crown has recognized. Emma looked down at the silver circlet resting beside the birth record. Its surface glowed faintly beneath her hand. Across the room, Adrian opened the small leather case he had carried from the palace. Inside was another document, sealed but unsigned. Emma recognized the language at once. It was a royal decree ending her service, dissolving the blood oath, and restoring her freedom. I wrote it before the wedding, Adrian said. I thought I could release you after the alliance was secured. Emma stared at the empty space where his signature should have been. But you did not. No, his voice was quiet. I was still afraid of losing the crown. Emma folded the decree and placed it beside the record of her birth. Then this is not proof of courage. It is proof that you knew what was right and chose not to do it. Adrian accepted the words without protest. Outside, the lantern stopped moving. A horn sounded once from the edge of the clearing. Victor's men had surrounded the cabin. Emma placed the crown over the hidden stairway, and silver light flowed through the carved stones beneath it. The passage opened wider, revealing a path that led directly back to the Moon Temple. We are not running anymore, she said. Olivia looked at her in surprise. Adrian straightened despite his exhaustion. Emma lifted the unsigned decree in one hand and her true birth record in the other. By dawn, every pack will know what Victor hid, what Olivia accepted, and what Adrian refused to sign. We are going back to the palace, and this time, the truth will enter before the crown. By the time the palace bells announced midnight, every alpha, counselor, and noble family had gathered in the great hall to witness Victor Hale assume the regency. An empty velvet cushion rested before him, waiting for a crown that had refused to return. Victor stood beneath the black and silver banners wearing a ceremonial robe that had once belonged to Adrian's grandfather. The kingdom requires order, he declared. The former king failed the moon goddess, and the woman who challenged his bloodline has fled. The main doors opened before he could continue. Emma entered first, carrying the crown in both hands. She wore no chains, no servant's collar, and no borrowed silk. Moonlight followed her across the marble as though the night itself had chosen to walk beside her. Olivia came next, holding the hidden birth record. Adrian followed without a crown, without royal guards, and without the authority that once made every wolf bow. The priestess entered last. The hall fell silent. Victor's expression barely changed. You return as fugitives. Emma stopped 20 feet from the throne. No, we return as witnesses. Olivia stepped forward and raised the parchment Victor had ordered her to destroy. Her voice trembled only once. I knew Emma was Adrian's mate. Victor knew as well. He promised me the position of Luna if I helped him hide the truth. Murmurs spread through the room. Victor smiled thinly. A frightened bride will say anything to save herself. Adrian moved beside Emma, but he did not speak for her. He faced the assembled packs instead. Then hear it from me. I recognized Emma as my fated mate. I chose political approval over the bond. I allowed the council to bind her with a blood oath, and I called that decision duty because I lacked the courage to call it betrayal. The confession settled over the hall with more force than any alpha. Command. Adrian removed the unsigned decree from his coat and placed it on the council table. I wrote this before the wedding and failed to sign it. I no longer possess the authority to make it law, but I sign it now as a declaration of what I should have done while the choice was still mine. He signed the decree ending Emma's service and placed a second document beside it, one that would outlaw forced Omega contracts and forbid any mate bond from being used as ownership or political leverage. Whether these laws live or die belongs to Emma and the assembled packs, he said. I surrender every claim to the throne. Victor's calm finally broke. You cannot surrender what has already been taken. He can surrender his right to demand it back, Emma replied. She placed her birth record beside the crown. The crescent symbol on the parchment began to shine. Silver light moved across the floor and climbed the walls. The crown remembered every oath sworn beneath it, every royal seal placed upon a lie, and every law twisted for ambition. Hidden writing appeared across the stone, revealing altered records, false decrees, and orders bearing Victor's seal. The entire hall watched his deception unfold. Victor stepped backward. This is an illusion. The priestess lifted her staff. The moon does not create lies. It reveals them. The captain of the royal guard removed Victor's regent seal from the council table. By witness of the gathered pacts and the law of the moon temple, your authority is suspended until judgment. One by one, the guards lowered their hands and stepped away from Victor. The crown rose from Emma's grasp and hovered before her. A voice older than memory moved through every heart. The throne belongs to no bloodline without the consent of the one who guards it. Emma looked at Adrian. He stood before her without command, rank, or defense. The voice asked the question the kingdom had been waiting to hear. Will you restore what was taken from him? Emma held the crown between them, and for the first time, the choice belonged entirely to her. Emma looked at Adrian, then at the crown glowing between her hands. For months, everyone around her had treated power as something to seize, protect, or trade. Victor had used fear to control a kingdom. Olivia had mistaken a title for worth. Adrian had chosen a throne over the bond the moon goddess had placed before him. Emma had paid the price for all of it. The great hall waited in silence. Adrian did not ask her to restore him. He did not reach for the crown. He simply lowered his head. The choice is yours, he said. It should have been yours from the beginning. Emma felt the mate bond stir, no longer like a chain, but like a door she could open or leave closed. She turned toward the gathered packs. A kingdom cannot call itself strong while its weakest people live without a voice. Her words carried through the hall without force or command. From this night forward, rank will never decide who deserves dignity. One by one, the counselors lowered their eyes. Olivia stepped beside Emma and removed the pearl circlet from her hair. I helped protect a lie because I was afraid of becoming nothing, she said. I was wrong. A title cannot give me the courage I refuse to find in myself. She placed the circlet on the council table and asked to serve as an envoy between the southern and northern pacts. Emma accepted, not because the past had disappeared, but because accountability had finally begun. The captain of the royal guard stepped before Victor and formally removed the regent seal from his robes. The assembled alphas confirmed the suspension of his authority, and the priestess invoked the law of the moon temple, placing him under judgment until every altered record and unlawful order could be examined. No one obeyed Victor when he protested. His power had depended on secrecy, and secrecy had finally abandoned him. Emma faced Adrian again. I will not return the crown to you. He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. I understand. You surrendered the throne because it was right, not because you expected a reward. Yes. Then live by that choice. Emma lifted the silver circlet and placed it upon her own head. Moonlight filled the hall, warm now instead of cold. The gathered wolves bowed, not to a frightened Omega, not to a servant, but to the woman who had refused to let suffering make her cruel. Her first act as Moon Queen was to sign the decrees Adrian had placed before the council. She ended every forced Omega contract in Blackwood territory and declared that no mate bond could ever be used as ownership, punishment, or political leverage. The assembled pacts added their seals, making the law binding across the kingdom. 1 year later, the kingdom gathered beneath the open sky for the festival of the new moon. Emma ruled as Moon Queen, and the laws she had enacted had changed lives far beyond the palace walls. Olivia traveled between pacts, rebuilding trust through honesty rather than ceremony. Adrian served along the northern border, protecting villages and carrying no title beyond his own name. He returned to the capital only when summoned. Emma found him beneath the same pine trees where they had first recognized the bond. He looked different without royal black, quieter and steadier, as though he had finally learned that strength did not require an audience. Do you forgive me? He asked. Emma studied him for a long moment. Forgiveness does not erase what happened. I know. And love is not ownership. I know that now. She extended her hand. Then walked beside me. Never above me. Adrian took her hand carefully, as though it were a gift he would never again mistake for a right. The moon goddess had taken his crown because he had confused power with strength. Emma gave him no throne in return, only the chance to prove that true strength could still be gentle, and that love, when freely chosen, could redeem what pride had nearly destroyed. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment, and what message or lesson did you take away from Emma and Adrian's journey? Share your opinion in the comments below and join the conversation with fellow story lovers. If you enjoyed this tale, please give the video a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Alpha's Regret Stories. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next exciting story filled with romance, drama, betrayal, and unforgettable twists. See you in the next story. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment, and what message or lesson did you take away from Emma and Adrian's journey? Share your opinion in the comments below and join the conversation with fellow story lovers. If you enjoyed this tale, please give the video a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Alpha's Regret Stories. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next exciting story filled with romance, drama, betrayal, and unforgettable twists. See you in the next story.